And now I want to introduce to you two speakers who are about to join me to make this a really fun afternoon. Now, for those who need to go, we will see you right back here at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. That's 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. If you have to go, you can use the same link as you did today. If you have any questions, gpalmer@curt.org or call the CURT office. We'd be glad to help you with your app or with anything whatsoever that you may need help on. I do want to take just another minute and recognize our terrific sponsors. Again, we were overwhelmed with some terrific support. We want to thank all of our sponsors, and we encourage you to visit their website, to visit the resources that they're making available to you. But most particularly, I want to give a shout out to our gold sponsor. And again, this is Autodesk Construction Cloud. You can learn more about them in the app and visit their website. There's also folks who are standing by to answer any questions that you might have, and you can learn who those folks are at their contacts in the app. And then, of course, our silver sponsor, Raceline, NCCER, longtime terrific friend of CURT, Avere, Powering America, a joint venture with NECA and IBEW, Procure, and USCAD. We are so grateful for your participation. And then there are a number of bronze sponsors. We'll be putting these promotionals up throughout the event, so you can access them as well. Do not mean to diminish them whatsoever. They are equally important, and we're so glad that that those who have sponsored have stepped up, and we intend to make that a good value for your investment in our organization, in this conference, etc. Well, there again, I mentioned that we've got some really fascinating, intriguing, and interesting people that I don't think have ever been brought together at the same time with the construction industry focus. So this is more or less what we're terming a fireside chat. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you two media icons who are going to bring us insight from their unique perspective on the world and in our industry. Joining us today from New York City, I presume, is Miss Jan Tuchman. Now, Jan has been on this stage many times over the years. As you know, she is editor-in-chief of Engineering News Record, arguably the finest and largest source of construction industry information. And she leads that high-powered editorial team every week in creating content, both online and in print and at live events. She's been a friend of the Construction Users Roundtable since its very inception, and it's always a delight to see you, Jan. Thank you so much for joining us. And then joining Jan is a newcomer to the Construction Users Roundtable, and it's a friend and colleague in many ways, Mr. Rich Boehne. Rich is chairman of the board of the E.W. Scripps company, and he is currently the vice chairman of the Associated Press out of New York City. It's the world's most extensive news organization. Rich also will be closing our conference on Wednesday afternoon, and you won't want to miss an amazing story that I've heard many times and learn something every single time I sit down and listen and taking notes. Rich is also notable in that he had a hand with a friend of his, along with a case of hot dogs and a case of beer one weekend in Anderson Township, a suburb of Cincinnati. And they came back and they pitched a little business that got turned down twice. But I think you've heard of it by now. It's called HGTV. Well, there is one of the fellows that made HGTV a reality. And they went back later and did something called the Food Network. Maybe you've heard of it. Anyway, Rich is a terrific individual. He is very generous. He and his wife live here in the greater Cincinnati area. I've known him since high school. And each time I hear him speak or read about him in the papers or in the community organizations, I'm struck by his generosity. Same goes with Jan Tuchman and her editorial team at ENR. we have never once felt challenged whatsoever by anything that they've reported. They are accurate, they are fast, they are cordial, professional. And Jan, that starts at the top, and we appreciate that. Thank you both for your service to communication and to media in a world where it seems like that very entity is pulling us apart. So the purpose of this time together this evening, frankly, is just to be a fireside chat. There is no script. There are no questions. We'll invite the audience to put some questions in the chat box if you'd like. There's about 500 people who are joining us this afternoon, Rich and Jan. So I want to start our time together with you, Rich, if I may. I heard you say something recently that chaos and confusion creates a ripe opportunity for change, and some of the biggest and best businesses will be birthed during this time of chaos. Help us understand a little more what you meant by that statement, and tell us what's going on in the world of communications from your vantage point.
Sure, thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for having both of us this afternoon, coming from a different kind of industry. And yeah, happy to talk a little bit about chaos, although, I don't want to give away what I'm going to do Wednesday. I don't want to go ahead and get ahead of the story there. But yeah, we work in an industry that's in the midst of just a dramatic season of change. One of my pet peeves as an executive has always been, I hated sitting in meetings where people talked about, there's a period of change and change is going on. Change is always going on, right? You just happen to be in these wonderful periods like we're in now where things accelerate and things are disjointed and there's convulsion. And out of that, there's a lot of opportunity. Our industry that we're in is really right at the crosshairs of that today. If you think back just a few years ago, we had a very different business with very controlled distribution channels, a very predictable business. And then you had the digital revolution, which just exploded what we do and created fragmentation beyond what anybody could have ever believed. Distribution channels and put it in the hands of users. And put it in the hands of those who are in audiences, and they're now all publishers. So very, very different than it was a few years ago. Am I jumping around on the screen?
You are a little bit, Rich, but we're tracking well. You are. And while you tweak that, Jan, let me ask you a question. Are you seeing chaos in the industry press? Like Rich has obviously viewing from his position as vice chairman of the Associated Press. What's your sense of what's going on in the industry?
I wouldn't call it chaos. It's just a period of I see it as a period of accelerating change, and I totally agree with him about the multiplication of players. It was a few magazines, and then came the websites, and then came the social media outlets, and then came the e-newsletters, and every company having a website. And there's many more ways for everybody in the industry, and of course the world, but the construction industry, part of the world, to get their message out. So there's all this noise. But I still think there's a place for the curated story. So I think there are people in the industry looking for someone to lay it all out and sort of bring order to all of this noise. And that's where Engineering News Record tries to step in and create some, although we have social, we have all the things. We have events, live events in non-COVID times, virtual events in COVID times, and website and e-newsletters and social media outlets. And we still have a print magazine because our users still want to read a print magazine. I bet you're one of them, Greg Sizemore.
I am.
You read a print magazine, and people like it and we have a digital version of the print magazine so that people who don't want paper, but they still want that curated story approach where where someone has organized the news and the features and lays it all out, and you can go from page to page. And of course, on the digital magazine, you can click through and go from one page to another and navigate different ways. And you can read the thing on your phone now, I find out. I didn't even know you could read the digital magazine on our phones until a couple months ago. Let's see, did I answer the question? I don't feel like it's chaos. It's just like so many layers, new layer upon layer upon layer. And we have to worm our way through it.
So thank you, Jan, for that. Rich, back to you for a moment. What else is happening in the media and the communication realm from your vantage point at Associated Press, and certainly being former CEO and now chairman of the board of this major media outlet, EW Scripps? What else is happening that you think that industry leaders need to be aware of? Is there something coming down the pike that we don't know about, perhaps? Or is there something that's happened right under our nose in recent months that perhaps we don't quite understand?
Well, I would hope that everybody here in the positions they're in would understand that social media dominates the distribution of information, especially the kind of information that we travel in, which is news. You know, today, say we often just sort of light a fuse and then off it goes from there. And I would assume everybody who's listening to us had very aggressive social media distribution channels for their employees, for their vendors, for everybody else, because that's really the primary platform today. And God forbid somebody's denying it or thinking it's going to go away, because it's not going to go away and we're probably only getting started.
That's an interesting point. We're only getting started. What do you see on the horizon, especially for business leaders? You know, you've got many stakeholders, obviously, in the communication industry, many different types of consumers, age, ethnic, gender demographics. But for those of us who are decision makers in our industry, what do we need to be aware of in terms of what might be coming down the pike? You said we're just getting started. What do you see?
Yeah. The other thing I'd say, I talk to people from a lot of other companies and a lot of other industries, and they seem to be still a lot of them are in denial of what the doctors are going through right now, which is people being able to do comparative shopping, people able to comment, people able to go back and review your work. And I'm still surprised at how many industries don't realize that that's going to become the norm, that your customer has been handed an enormous amount of power and they're going to use it. There's really no going back.
You mentioned something the other day about news being so instantaneous. One of the hallmarks, I think, of ENR is back in the day, we had the weekly magazine, and that was considered about as fast as news could travel. And if there was a major construction story around the world, it seemed like ENR had someone on it immediately and was reporting about it on the next cycle. Today, it seems to be so every day. Jan, how do you feel that the communications business in the construction industry is going to change the way we consume information and therefore make decisions?
Well, we are definitely looking at information by the second, by the day, and yes, something that was a weekly magazine is now more of a daily news provider. We hope you're all looking at our daily news feed at our website, and because we are covering things as they happen. And I would like to comment, though, on something that Rich brought up, which is looking back. You know, you've also got that long tail. Everything that you ever wrote is up there on your website, and it's out there somewhere on the internet, and people find it. We had someone writing in and requesting a correction to a story that was written in 2009. And you know, you just to go back and figure out, this is someone who says that it needs to be corrected, but we have to, you know, figure out, was it right in the first place, or does it need to be corrected? But, you know, these things that catch up with you. So it's all out there, this enormous, vast pool of information. So there's that. And then there's the tick, 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 tick. One of a prominent engineer used to call ENR the second hand of the construction industry. And that was when we were a weekly magazine. We were the second hand. Now we hope we're really are the second hand, but there's other people out there. There's lots of other people out there, and that has to sharpen our competitive skill set. We have to, keep going after every story every day.
Rich, I'm sure you've had people come to you and say, boy, if we could just go back to the good old days of Walter Cronkite, CBS News, Grandpa, if you will, sharing the truth without challenge. And if we could go back to the old Rocky Mountain Press or the Cincinnati Enquirer or some of these old newspapers that were venerated in their time, what do you have to say to those of us who probably look like us three, who long for the good old days of the Walter Cronkite era? Was it the good old days? And how is this better?
No, I don't think it was. Certainly many of my colleagues think it was, because we controlled the flow of information then. No, I think you're in a much better world today. Free speech is freer than it's ever been in human history. No comparison where we are today. So when you think about how consumers have been empowered through the digital revolution, these are the people in my business who really love free speech and believe in raising voices and minority voices and giving everybody a chance to be heard. I mean, these are the days we prayed for. This is what I hope to see. It's a little ugly and it's bumpy and it's the Wild West, and things result across these platforms like we saw on January 6th in DC. But on balance, I'm much more a proponent of where we are today than I was back when there were only a few channels and they were very tightly controlled by people like me who were editors or publishers or news directors.
Fascinating. So do you feel that the demographic has changed? Obviously, Jan correctly pointed out that Greg Sizemore prefers the magazine in his hand on an airplane or in a car. So that's one demographic. How are the other demographics changing the deliverable, and what seems to be the most powerful of the demographics? Now, I'm not aware how you all identify those demographics, but they must be segmented in some fashion. Who's driving the train now?
I don't think it's probably like everybody else who's at this conference. You've had to sit through these yucky seminars talking about what millennials are like, and how different millennials are. I think that's all garbage, really. Every generation is different. Every generation has something to deal with. Some of it because of current events around us, but most of it is due to the technology. So it's technology that's driving the difference today. It's something like 7 or 8 out of every 10 people on Earth have access to a mobile communications device.
What was the statistic again?
I think it's about 7 out of 10 people on Earth have access to a mobile communication device. Many, many more than have access to a flush toilet, but by a lot. So, I mean, if you ask people to an economic decision, would you rather go to the bathroom in the house or have access to Twitter? It appears they would rather have access to Twitter. And that's what's driving this revolution more than just age. I think we're all today just pretty much connected to our, to our mobile device. And that's what's driving it. It's really the technology right now, not so much the demographics, in my opinion.
How is technology, Jan, and research, how does it play out? Now, I know you cover it in our magazine, and everything you cover seems to be covered quite well, by the way. But when you look at the future delivery systems, what does tomorrow hold for the construction industry? What are y'all looking at in terms of making us better, more well-informed decision makers? Any thoughts on that, Jan?
Well, first I just have to respond to what
Please.
Rich was about the people would rather have access to Twitter than to a flush toilet.
Twitter versus toilets.
What came to my mind when you said that is probably less costly to have access to Twitter, to get a mobile device, than it is to bring running water and a flush toilet into your house, because that costs real money. That costs several $1,000s, even way out wherever in Africa or Asia that doesn't have that access. And, you can get a mobile phone, or I don't, still have to pay some kind of, anyway, let's not get into details of that. But the point just being that it's the cost of a real infrastructure is still high. And that's one of the big issues in America and every other country, that there still is, there are roads and bridges and water systems, and the need for clean water and all that stuff costs serious dollars. And, more so than putting up some cell towers, by orders of magnitude. Mm-hmm. So now I'm sorry, I was thinking about that. And your next question, Greg.
No, you're good. That's an intriguing thought. And it's a great commentary on Rich's point. What is your organization doing to anticipate new technologies or new means or ways to get information out to your readership? I mean, you've got the live events, you've got Twitter, you've got obviously a Facebook presence and a website, and then you got the good old magazines that you send out. Are you guys asking the what if question in terms of what about tomorrow? And are partnerships, media partnerships on the horizon, perhaps, to do a better job, a more customized, perhaps concierge version of consuming news? Thoughts?
Partnerships. There were a lot of different slices of that question.
Yes, there are.
And the first one was that I think that our position is that we're a content provider, and we want to provide that content to our construction industry professional audience on whatever technology or platform that they would like to consume it. So when a new technology comes along, we're certainly going to try to get ourselves ready to participate in that technology, and we're not going to eliminate any of the channels unless I find that our audience is no longer interested in that channel. When nobody wants a print magazine, and by the way, we are now part of a publishing company called BNP Media, and they have like 55 different titles in 7 different industries, and they just this past year, eliminated print magazines for anyone who didn't have paid subscribers. So those of us who have people who want print magazines enough to pay for them, we still are offering that. But for those publications that don't have a paid audience, they've eliminated that channel. So it's not just people wanting it, but people being willing to pay for it. But most channels are less costly than print. Most of the new channels are less costly. So that's that part of the question. And when the new thing comes along, and we joke about TV shows or movies where you plug the channel. Well, you wouldn't have to plug it now because we would be wireless, but we would implant a chip and we would be able to communicate somehow. And just get you somehow select. I'm a science fiction fan, so you select for the information that you want to download into your brain.
Yeah,
So
that's
the channel of the future.
I think that's what I was getting at is are we going to be a little bit more boutique-ish? Back in the day, you went to your doctor, and your doctor was a general practitioner, or today what's called a family practitioner. You remember them up and down North Fort Thomas Avenue, Rich. And today there's the cardiologist and the pulmonologist and the immunologist and the general practitioner and the family practitioner and the pediatrician and the radiologist. We go on and on. Is news going to be consumed in those narrow silos in the future? What do you see as the trend there? Rich, you want to swing at that one?
It already is.
Mm-hmm.
It's by we're living that today. We just went through an election where people pretty much stayed in their lane, and we're very happy to stay in their lane. It's I think that's the new reality. It's back to the future. If you look back some years ago, every city had 4, 5, 6 newspapers. You had one catered to Democrats, one to Republican, one to socialists, one to communists. By race, by ethnic group, by country of origin. And people were very, very fragmented at the time. And then you had that period that you were talking about, Greg, that we now call the good old days. But, we're not a lot different than we were certainly prior to the Second World War, when media was very, very fragmented. Can I mention one other thing?
Of course.
Yeah, coming along, and I don't know how you think of it in the construction industry, but media was a highly regulated business. I mean, it seems crazy to me that today, even today, or until very recently, you couldn't own a newspaper and a television station in the same city. And you couldn't own more than one television station in the same city. We were highly, highly regulated. And then the internet came along. And by the way, those sort of regulations today mean about as much as telling me I can't park my horse in the lobby. I mean, that's about how relevant those regulations are today. But the internet came along and it developed so fast, it outran all regulation. Nobody had time to think about it until it was, until Facebook and Google and Yahoo and others were, global, huge players. So that still fascinates us, how an industry can change fundamentally so quickly that regulation cannot keep up. And that's very much where we sit today in the media industry. I don't know how you all think of it in construction, and if there are any parallels there.
Jan, you want to respond, please? Yes.
I can chime in on that.
Please.
And also to address the point that I didn't really get to when you were talking about collaboration in the industry, where that's an interesting point, because a lot of people, we want to collaborate, but at the same time, if you're the media, you have to have a certain amount of distance in order to, stay outside of conflicts of interest if you care about that, which of course there's many new media, as Rich has been talking about. There's a lot of many new media avenues that purposefully do not, they want to tell a particular story, and that's their mission. So, but certainly we get a lot of people coming to us and wanting to collaborate. And in some, what we try to do is to make sure that if we do something for one group, it's the same kind of thing we would do for every group, so that they're all getting the same level of attention from ENR. So if we would be a judge, provide a judge for one of their contests, we would do that for all the groups. And if we would moderate a panel at an event or speak at an event such as this one, that we would do that for all the groups. And now, of course, I've gone down that road, and I lost the thing that Rich was just commenting about.
Regulation.
Oh yeah, regulation, right? And that is so. Yes, very interesting point, that how the internet has outrun, and regulation had to do with, I believe, things that cross state lines, right? And so they were regulating you because you're in your airtime is in more than one state. It's like the FCC
in the same city, in the same market. Yes.
Yeah, and it was in restraint of. They would consider it in restraint of trade if you.
Yeah, it was
multiple media in one city.
Yeah, and it was seen as preventing consolidation of power. Mm-hmm. Politicians have to run for office every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or whatever. And if the same person would own the big newspaper and the big TV station and a market, and that person didn't like that politician, it could be a pretty tough election cycle. Mm-hmm. So and we still live with many, many rules that make sure there are. We call it the eight voices test. And the voices test, how many independent voices are there in each city in America? That's why there's so much ownership that's why if you're sitting in a small market today, Knoxville, Tennessee, or somewhere like that, and wondering, how come all the TV stations are owned by someone different? It's because of the voices test and the regulation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we feel that as much being in one industry, but we do have a lot of verticals and a few horizontals. I mean, I totally agree with your point about the many, many verticals, which we've had in this industry for quite a long time. And then a few more. In fact, it's something that Greg and I have talked about, that ENR and CURT are organizations that look out over the whole industry, because they have owners in all these different sectors.
So let's thank you for weighing in on that. Let's talk the young professional, the next gen. What kind of dynamism are they bringing to the communication business? And and do you see them taking a greater role? I think of some congressmen that people like to either cap on or praise, regulating the media, getting rid of the bad players, whatever she meant by those comments. To what extent is the next gen, the young professional, going to have an influence on on the communication business? Not necessarily construction, Jan. We've written about that a long, long time, but about media and communication. Rich, you want to start us off on that? The impact of the next gen or the young professional on the business of communication?
Yeah, sure. I'll just very briefly, and I think everybody's seeing it around us. The definitions of free speech are changing and being molded sometimes in different ways. And many young professionals really feel that, there's nothing wrong with regulating speech. They have very, very wide definitions of hate speech, which surprised me. Free speech on college campuses has been under attack quite a lot over the past 10 years. I often get myself in trouble speaking on college campuses when I advocate aggressively for real open free speech. So I don't know if that's a reaction to what they've seen out of people like me and the generation before them. If so, that might be my fault. Or if they're bringing some new notion to how people talk to one another in this country and how it's supposed to work. I don't really know. Anytime you start shutting down free speech, it really worries me, and I think should worry any of us who live and work and build the economy in this democracy. But we'll see. They're fairly aggressive.
Yeah. Jan, do you find them equally aggressive in our business?
I think this conversation touches on the topic of truth and the search for truth, and can media find truth? And is there, to use the word that used to be used, you were trying to not compromise your objectivity. But I'm not sure that, everyone always said it's not really possible. No one can be fully objective about anything. And I think that with the next generation has gone over to a feeling of, well, I'm not even going to try to some extent. It's interesting what you say about finding young people today not wanting to put some bounds. Maybe it is a reaction against this, so many different channels being very, very not having, they're following a platform more than they're looking for truth.
Well, you and I, we have worked and grown up in a world where you would always tell both sides, and you would always make sure. You couldn't get a story on the air or in print without some balance and somebody from the other side speaking. And there are many young professionals in our industry today who say that that's not truth. Maybe truth is just telling it from one side, because that's true. Why do we have to mess with this telling the other side? Yeah.
Because the other side is wrong.
Yeah, that's right. So that's there's a real push and pull in our industry right now.
Journalists were trying in the traditional, as we're saying, traditional, when we were young and middle-aged.
Easy there, Jan.
We were looking to be in the center, sort of. We were looking to tell both sides and feeling that the truth would emerge from this free marketplace of ideas. And now there's some new wave journalists are feeling that they're telling the story that's the right story to tell.
Yeah, want to be they'll think there's anything wrong with activism.
Mhm.
But, the Scripps logo, or the Scripps motto since the 1920s has been give light and the people will find their own way. And we always just emphasize people will find their own way. It's not our job to tell them which way to go. They'll find their way. We just provide the light and the context and the facts. I certainly hope that motto is still there 25 years now, but we'll see. It'll be up to me.
Yeah, I do too, Rich. By the way, if you're just now joining us, the Construction Users Roundtable 2021 virtual conference, we are chatting just very informally with two industry leaders, two media leaders, Rich Boehne, chairman of the board of EW Scripps Company, and Jan Tuchman with the NR. And if you have some questions, why simply go to the chat function in your Zoom capability there and type them in, and we'll lob them over the fence to Rich and Jan. And again, this is an informal, unscripted, not topical conversation with where the communications business is going and how it affects us as industry leaders and how we get our information, where we get our information, how reliable the information is. Earlier this afternoon, folks, one of our lead presenters was Anirban Basu. You've heard him many times, Jan, from Sage Policy Group in Baltimore. And when asked about the unintended consequence, and he was giving a rundown on the economy, when asked about the unintended consequence of economic trends, et cetera, he said one of the things that bothers him most and worries him most and that he finds most dangerous among our culture is anger and the impact that anger is having on spending trends, on saving trends, on job creation, and certainly the politics behind it. I thought he would say that the unintended consequence is fear, because fear, as we know, can be so stifling, so much history on that over the ages. But he didn't say fear, he said anger. Do you find that playing out in your business? And if so, is there a way to calm us down, those of you who lead the narrative, and maybe not lead the narrative, but certainly is the outlet for narratives that people develop? Is there a way to calm us down so that the anger and the upset and the angst can somehow be addressed? And is it an issue? Would you agree with Anirban? Rich, you want to take a shot at that question? Then we'll go to Jan. Then we'll go to Greg Palmer in our control room to see if there's some questions that others would like to ask. Rich?
Well, yeah, I'd say anger's it's sort of if there's an anger index, we're certainly, seems like we're at a 50-year high. No doubt about that. A lot of it having to do with the politics and the epidemic and everything else. As I've told Greg and Janet, the news organizations that I'm associated with, probably the first time in my career, certainly in the United States, we've had people beaten and shoved and equipment smashed and, things that we really only worried about if you were heading to Guatemala or Mexico City or someplace like that. And we're seeing it right here in the United States. Many people who are watching this might think, yeah, dandy, you deserve it. That's what you get. And if we do, we do. I accept that. But the level of, as you say, Greg, anger that we see out there, a lot of it being partisan, is it's really troubling. I honestly worry for my children and grandchildren sometimes, and hope we can keep this thing between the rails and bring some decent discussion and diplomacy back to our own churches and schools.
So let me play devil's advocate with you for a moment, Rich. And Rich and I are friends from long time ago. But does the news media deserve that? Nobody was ever mad at Walter Cronkite. And anybody that ever shot at Walter Cronkite was when he was in Vietnam trying to report on the war in '68. But has the industry invited that ire and in some way responsible for the emotional state of our culture? Thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Because there isn't just one industry, right? There are all these different channels. There are a number of us who dedicate our lives to sitting in the middle and being balanced and objective and giving light, letting people find their own way. But then very quickly on the right and the left are many, many businesses who favor a very specific point of view. I'd like to think that's where most of the anger has risen from, moving out away from us, but the others. But certainly we've been on the wrong end of it as well, and as people find backlash. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. If I'm watching Fox News and they talk all evening about the media, as if they're not part of it. Yeah,
Voice.
everybody does that, right? And everybody talks about it's about the others. So certainly, yes. If you mean you can turn on your TV and find messages or on Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else that are contributing to this, absolutely, no doubt about that.
Jan, how about from your perspective, has this emotion infiltrated our industry? And if so, how? Thoughts?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you see it even in, we wrote an editorial last year about that, that dealt with, I mean, you have a commentary, you have a place for opinion, you have commentaries, and there's an editorial that we wrote that we got so much pushback, so many angry letters. That there is a place for commentary. There are places to put opinion that says opinion, but I wonder whether there's more anger now than in the past. Was in the days of the Vietnam War protests, there was a lot of anger. In the days of civil rights protests, there was a lot of anger. There have been certainly times in our history that there have been this much. I wonder if it's that we hear about it so much more now because of that we have these voices that are, shouting from the rooftops their opinions without any filter, which is, that's their right. This is the free speech issue.
Yep.
So if I may, Jan, what was the issue that seemed to draw ire in the last year or two? Just the topic. I'm curious because our industry is fairly cooperative. You've been to our conferences where we've had owners and contractors and sub and the legal folks and the accounting folks and even the union folks. And you may have just heard the presentation with Steve Mulva and myself where, we're collaborating and trying to maximize strengths and minimize any gaps. What in the world could possibly be so polarizing and anger producing in our business?
It was President Trump's ability to get infrastructure accomplished. That was one of his initiatives. Did he get there? And we said he didn't. And people very, 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 significantly different views on that, and from both sides, by the way.
Would that have happened 10 years ago, you think, Jan?
I don't know. And we did. And the thing is, we pointed out that we have written about basically people were saying, you're an engineering publication. Don't talk about politics. And we said, well, politics is part of everything
Sure.
in life. And this is, an opinion page piece, not a story, but we got a lot of letters.
That's fascinating to me. If you're just now joining us, you're joining Rich Boehne and Jan Tuchman. Rich, chairman of the board of EW Scripps, a media giant, and Jan Tuchman, of course, editor-in-chief of the leading magazine in the construction industry. And if you have some questions, throw them in the chat box and we'll get to you as soon as we can. If we don't get to your questions, why we'll let the folks at the CURT office take those questions and try to get you some answers from these folks anyway. Rich, I think you're about to make a comment, and perhaps I cut you off with that.
No, I just thought maybe you were going to transition, and I wanted to go back and offer a glass half full.
Please go right ahead.
Very quickly.
No, please take your time.
Yeah, 7-8 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet with and speak with a group of Iraqi college students who were touring the U.S. And I assume, I'm trying to remember, it might have been a government-sponsored tour, trying to foster some understanding and cooperation. And it was fascinating. These college students, all very bright, just couldn't fathom, couldn't get their head around the idea of free speech. Certainly not to the degree that we have it here in the United States. I got questions like, which party tells you what to do? Which party do you work for? So we had to try to work through that. We had a fascinating discussion about the use of religious images and symbolism. Not so much about the images themselves, but who would make the decisions about how those would be used. And they were just perplexed when I said, I certainly don't make those decisions. They'd be made in individual newsrooms by people all across the country. And we don't have any central control. We have policies and mission and guidelines, but those decisions are made by journalists in the field. And it was a reminder to me that we live in an incredibly special place, that as chaotic and difficult and angry as it has been, and it certainly has, this is an incredible place. And people forget how special our free speech rights are here in the United States. And they're really rare. And we should do everything we can to protect them.
Great point. What do you think the unintended consequence is with this freedom and this, pardon me, anybody can be a publisher at any given moment and almost instantaneous communication? Are there any unintended consequences for those kinds of freedoms, Rich?
Well, sure. Yeah, because you only have to consume what you agree with. That's certainly an unintended consequence. But if people are just interested in, if you only like to read about fishing, I guess you've got a God-given and a constitutional right to just read about fishing. And I think that's the way our country is built. That sounds like, and it appears to have unintended consequences, but I don't know if they're good or bad. Yeah. Maybe someday we'll know.
Jan, any thoughts on that point before we go to a question from the room in the back?
Some people decide not to read at all. So they become informed about what they want to become informed about.
Mm-hmm. Great. Greg Palmer, I think we have some questions that have come in since we started our time together. Do you care to share one of those in the queue with us, Greg?
It seems like almost everyone in our nation is soured on the media these days. It seems like nothing you read or hear can be trusted. How do we overcome this as a nation? We need trusted media for a free market business and a democratic society to function normally. Seems like dollars drive the spin on every story in the media. Even PBS is biased. What can be done?
Well, obviously, I have a different point of view on a good bit of that.
Well, share it with us.
Yeah, I think there is plenty of trusted media, but including, I think, the Scripps outlets, I think the Associated Press, the BBC, who was the one mentioned, NPR, I think is one of my strong contenders for being balanced and real. But unfortunately, the burden is going to be on the reader and the viewer. And there's really no way somebody like me or anybody else can stand and said, by the way, here it comes and it's all true, and people are going to accept it. So that the lens it really belongs to the consumer today. And we really do need a factual work, and I think there is plenty of it out there. But in this fragmented world, you got to find it yourself. You've got to be the editor.
And I think that it's important to convey to the next generation and to have part of the education process be to emphasize the importance of being that reader and of reading multiple channels, if not just reading read the thing that you gravitate to, the publication that like talks to you and tells you what you think is instinctively the story. But read some others too. Expose yourself to more than one point of view. That if we were conveying that through the education process, we would be developing a next generation that will have more ability to sort and filter the news that they get, and to see different points of view and to know that there's value. And I think actually, I hear from a lot of construction industry companies about how they have come to realize how important diversity is to their business, and that they realize that having a diverse workforce. I was just hearing from the president of Jacobs, Bob Pragada.
Mm-hmm.
He's the COO of Jacobs. And they have a huge, Rich, if you don't know the company, maybe you do know the company, but they're very, very large and engineer and contractor. And they are very committed to having a diverse workforce, because they realize that that's how you become innovative, and that through the diverse workforce, you become an innovative company, and you have more growth and you have more success. So, and I'm hearing that from many, many different construction companies. So I think that's giving me a little clue that there are forces out there that are trying to go for diversity and to look at these multiple opinions and multiple points of view, and to figure out to learn right from wrong, basically.
Right, exactly.
Greg, can I add
go ahead, please.
Just a quick, I think people would be surprised at how little money drives most of these decisions. These audience segments, liberals, conservatives, evangelicals, urbans, rural people, there are big enough groups there that any of them can make a good business. And if you notice, Ford, Pepsi, everybody else, they advertise across all these channels. Very few of these decisions are made because of money. And in fact, people in many companies, including the ones I'm associated with, we make decisions all the time that are not in our economic best interest. Yeah. We do it almost gleefully and have a church and state structure in our organizations.
Yeah, I'd like to comment also on the financial side of this, and that's I think that of course we're businesses. Media are businesses like every other business, and you don't continue to exist if you don't have revenue sources, both the audience revenue sources and advertising revenue sources. But advertisers are keenly interested in how they're connecting to your audience. And sometimes it's more important about the audience than about what the publication has, what it's saying in its pages. It's like, who's reading you? That's what they want to know.
Yeah.
Interesting. And by the way, again, if you're just joining us late in the afternoon, we're just having we call it a fireside chat, but I don't see a fire in anybody's box there, including my own, but you get the point. If you have a question, throw it in the chat box, and we will endeavor to get around to it. Greg, how about another one that's come in the last few moments?
If one is interested in engaging with the issue of truth in public discourse, do you have a recommendation for the best place to stand? Education policy, legal representatives?
Not sure I totally understand the question, but if you guys can extrapolate an answer for that question.
My best place to stand. Yeah. If they can come back and help me out, I'd be.
Yeah, whoever asked the question, give us a little clarity on that. And
here we go. Where should we try to engage?
Well, obviously through an EW Scripps Corp company outlet or ENR, right? There is no other truth source. Just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding. I think that I would again. I think it's the everyone needs to read more than one magazine. Even in construction, there are other places, especially if you want, more deep dive into a particular how to design structural connections. We're not going to get there in depth in ENR. Yeah. We're going to more of a broad business magazine and broad project and project delivery trends and some engineering in there too. But anyway, you need more than no matter what you want to learn about and be exposed to. I think you need multiple sources. That would be my answer.
I'd say that, and just to remind people that an awful lot of the world is actually fairly gray. It's not that terribly black and white. And get back to a point where we appreciate those around us. I'm a longtime registered independent. I live with a Republican, a fairly aggressive Republican, and my spouse. My kids and grandkids go to school with people from all kinds of backgrounds, and just a good reminder that this country is quite a big and wonderful salad bowl of ingredients and people and opinions and thoughts and backgrounds and wounds and victories and hopes. I just really, that's what worries me most, how people on the streets have stopped talking to one another, and people at church have stopped talking to one another based on a part of their lives that's very important, but it's certainly not their whole life. Certainly have other things that would bring them together. We'll try to do our part in the media business, but we certainly got to get a little friendlier on the streets, I think, to get us to a better place.
Kind of goes back to that anger issue that Anirban brought out hours ago now, that the impact that anger has on economic trends is just a fascinating new area of research and discussion. And obviously it's displayed quite prominently in your all's business.
You ask anybody who sells ammo, it's ammo sales are pretty good these days. I don't know if that's fear or anger, but it's one or the other.
It's one or the other, or both. So over the course of the last several minutes, you've both mentioned the term world, international, etc. What's going on in other countries that we need to be mindful of? We need to watch out for here, either in a positive way or in a threatening way. Is there anything out there that we may not be aware of that could easily spill over into our business, our industry, from other places in the world, either positively or in a threatening way? Rich?
I think, in our business, one of the things we watch is regulation. Our business does not transition well to other nations because media law is so particular and so aggressive in many places. Even inside the EU, you can't just take a channel and put it on the air in Germany and then put it on in France because of local rules. Even in Canada, here in North America, there are a lot of rules. So certainly we watch regulation and things like that. The only thing I'd say is there just are no islands. I mean, this is as much as I try to buy American, and even I've been trying lately to figure out where I can buy all American clothes.
Good luck.
It's hard to do, but there are new wonderful brands that are out there. But it's a very tightly linked world. Certainly no better evidence than that than how quick a virus spreads. It almost spread faster than a rumor or a viral TikTok. It really moved quickly, and that's not going to change either.
Right. Jan, any perspective from the international point of view?
First thing that flooded into my head, of course, was the issues of pandemic and how it's, this is something that we've all shared all around the world, sadly. And then the new strains that we're sharing. And I mention it as construction related because it's intensely construction related, because it's affecting, the industry, and we're coping, and things are getting built still, and everybody's out there working like crazy, and we're learning new ways to work. And which I think some of the our ability to use more tools like this, would we have had a Zoom like this in the past? No, we wouldn't. And now, but will we in the future? Of course we will. Yeah. And this opens it up to having, could we have a contractor from China or a design firm from India? Of course we could. if they don't mind, if we can figure out a time that it's not that we're both awake, that we're all awake to participate. But I think that's, that is something that's been a spin-off of the pandemic, this ability to be more virtual, to work more virtually, even in a construction industry that's very physical. That we're, that's something that's going to go forward with us, and that's kind of a positive outcome, I think. But
the technology that's being created as a result of this pandemic, even in our business, the use of drones, for example, for safety inspections, or GoPro cameras, and the guy doing the inspection is hundreds of miles away, where it used to be get on a plane and hotel and dine and then go to the site, make his report. That's all changing considerably. And I think that's arguably a part of your business as well. Jan?
Oh, I just wanted to interject on that point that there were a lot of, in speaking of regulation, there were a lot of regulations that prohibited, that required an inspector to be physically present, that it required people to be physically present to sign contracts. There were regulations intervening in the ability to use technology that's been around for a while. And now they finally had to say, okay, we have to do it. We'll allow remote inspections. We'll allow remote contract signings. And so business is getting done.
And surprisingly, getting done well in many of those areas. I think it's been a delightful response. Greg, we only have a few minutes. Let's take one more question from the queue. And then if you've put a question in the chat box and we didn't get to your question, we'll make sure it gets to Jan and Rich, and I know they'll be so gracious to weigh in. Greg, sorry, go ahead. One more.
And I believe we touched on this one just a little bit, but the question is, given the misinformation in social media, what do you see the path forward to get accurate news is?
We did deal with that a little bit, Rich.
No, the only thing I'd say is you have to remember that one person's misinformation is another person's facts. And many years of media research shows that what people think is true is what they agree with. That hasn't changed through many years of media research. So again, the facts are out there. There's good, clean stuff available, but the reader and viewer has got to look for it.
Great. Jan?
I was going to say that I think the fact that we're getting this question again, kind of similar question again, is that it indicates that there's a lot of, this is really on people's minds of how to evaluate everything that they're reading. And again, I don't have any, like magic wand to be able to sort that or to have it, the truth glows, but it doesn't work that way.
Well, it does at Scripps because their tagline says so, give people the light and they'll find their own way. So,
but that's again, that's what we call free speech. That's what it is by definition.
From either one of you, and I know we're running out of time, but is there a question that was not asked that you were quite sure would be asked and you were prepared to weigh in on? Wanted to give you an opportunity to perhaps bring something forward that we haven't quite harvested yet from your mind. And no's an okay answer.
I can't think of anything. I think you hit on most of them.
Super. Jan, anything at all?
Yeah, I think we had a spirited pre-call, and I think that we covered a lot of those issues quite well.
Yes, we did. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jan and Rich for joining us, for weighing in with their perspective in a very difficult industry, theirs, communication, media. Not so much ours this afternoon, but in theirs. I'll also let you know that their contact information should be in the app. Is that right, Greg? Just a little yes or no in my ear will help. Contact information for Jan and Rich is available. And we'll be also hearing more from Rich on Wednesday afternoon. Jan, you're welcome to join us for that. I want to also invite you to weigh in on the survey. If you go to your app under Agenda and you look at today and find their presentation, just weigh in on the value that you've gotten out of this presentation. Remember, it's more of a chat. It was unscripted on purpose. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've spent nearly an hour here together. So it's been a quite lively discussion. Any final thoughts at all, Richard? Jan, you get to have the last word.
Okay, I will chime in to say,
please,
that because you were saying, has there been anything that we didn't touch on? And I did think of a little bit of an area that we didn't touch on, is that I find this accelerating pace of change, the changing technology, it just, to my view, it feels like the pace of change just keeps accelerating. And so that makes me think, how far out could some things that we just think, are just totally science fiction. But what would our selves of 30 years ago, or those of us old enough 50 years ago, think about today? I mean, it's just so completely mind-boggling that it makes me think about we say 2050, I probably won't be here in 2050, but my daughter, what will her life be like? 30, well, now it's 29 years from now. It's hard to imagine.
I think that's a question that's been asked down through the ages.
Oh yeah.
When parents have considered children and the rapid rate of change that you've mentioned. We're kind of waxing philosophical, but that's okay. We're at the end of the day, and that's what we had you on here for. But you're right, the rapid rate of change makes you wonder what if. I remember the Jetsons, all three of us remember the Jetsons, and things that were comical, science fiction, cartoonish then, are many of those are real today. And I think we're going to see more of that. Rich?
I'm going to say, we, in our business, we study often around the time of the Civil War, consumer photography developed. And there was a lot of thinking that people couldn't handle consumer photography, and it should be regulated. It just people couldn't understand it. And then you read about when telephones first came in, and people said, wait a minute, are you telling me that thing could ring anytime? And these were real issues at the time, and just seemed so long ago and far away. But that's exactly what this discussion, I agree with Janet, that's what this discussion will probably look like in another 25 or 30 years. There'll be a whole new set of issues to deal with.
Indeed.
Hopefully we'll still be in a better place.
Boy, what a word for us all. And hopefully we will all be in a better place. And I think we have an individual responsibility to that, Rich, is, we cannot change the world. We cannot clean it up, but we can sweep the porch we're standing on. And if we'll take some personal responsibility to be good and do good, then just perhaps together, collectively, with the largest industry in the United States and these communication leaders, just maybe we can provide some terrific hope for our children and our grandchildren. And with that, I want to thank you again, Rich and Jan, for joining us. And for you who are listening and watching, I thank you as well. We'll reconvene here tomorrow at 1 p.m. You can use the same link that you used today to access us tomorrow. In the meantime, take care of yourself and each other. Thank you and good night.